Can you imagine, dear viewer, something terrifying boarding a passenger bus and riding with them after midnight? And not only that, but something completely unexpected happening because of this thing that got on the bus? I know you might think such a thing couldn't possibly happen, but come with me and let me take you to the place where it did. This incident took place in China, specifically in the city of Beijing, on bus number 375. This bus departed from its starting station after midnight, around 12 a.m., and it was the last bus to leave the station that night. The passengers on board were few, countable on one hand. As the bus was traveling along its route, the driver suddenly noticed, from a distance, what looked like the shadows of two people standing in the middle of the road in the dead of night, in the freezing cold, signaling the bus to stop with their hands. The bus stopped, the door opened, and they boarded. When the driver saw these two individuals, his jaw dropped in shock and fear. All the passengers on the bus were frozen, terrified by what they saw. The bus continued its journey afterward, but the question is, were the ones who boarded the bus that night even human? Why were the driver and passengers so terrified? And most importantly, can you guess what happened to that bus that night? These are the questions we'll answer in today's episode. For your information, this terrifying story is one of the strangest incidents that has ever happened in China, and to this day, it remains unexplained. If this is your first time watching my channel and you're interested in horror, mystery, and crime stories, this is what we offer here. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and join our family. All I ask is that you support me by sharing the channel and liking this episode. Without further ado, let's dive into the details of the story. The story begins, as I mentioned, in Beijing, China, specifically in November 1995. There was a bus departing from the Yuanmingyuan station, and this was the last bus to leave that day. The bus's number was 375. It was supposed to complete its final route and return to the station as usual, resuming its service the next morning like normal. But what happened was the complete opposite on that day. Around 12 a.m., the weather was extremely cold with light winds. The bus driver boarded the bus, accompanied, as usual, by an assistant, typically a woman whose job was to supervise the passengers inside, organize them, and distribute tickets. As the bus started moving and traveled for a while, it stopped at a designated spot and picked up 3 passengers, a young, single man traveling alone and a married couple. The bus continued on its route for a certain distance until it reached one of the stations and stopped. At this point, an elderly woman boarded the bus. She walked down the aisle in the middle of the bus until she reached the second-to-last seat and sat down. The bus moved again, continuing its journey through the dark, cold night. All the passengers were quiet, calmly waiting for the ride to end so they could return to their homes. During the journey, after some time, the bus driver suddenly slammed on the brakes so hard that the passengers' heads hit the seats in front of them. The reason for his sudden stop in the middle of the road was that he spotted 2 people standing in the middle of the street, signaling for him to stop so they could board. The driver was furious at their reckless behavior because he could have run them over. Normally, this bus only stopped at official stations, not in the middle of the road like this. But against all expectations, and despite the passengers assuming the driver would ignore them and continue, he stopped the bus and opened the door. What they saw next was shocking and terrifying, sending fear into the hearts of all the passengers. Even the driver himself was staring at the 2 individuals in shock, his mouth agape from the horror he witnessed. As soon as the 2 people boarded the bus, everyone understood why the driver was so shocked and terrified. These 2 individuals had sharp, rigid, and frightening features, dressed in something resembling traditional Chinese clothing, old-fashioned attire that no one would wear in that era, as if time had long passed it by. The clothes were overly long on them, but that wasn't the strange part. We said there were 2 people, but in reality, there were 3, not 2. They were carrying a third person between them, dragging him along. His head was bowed down, his facial features hidden, as if he were exhausted or drained. When the 3 boarded the bus, they walked down the middle aisle, supporting the third man between them, completely silent. The other passengers stared at them, terrified by their appearance, until they reached the very last seat. They sat the third person in the middle, with the other two sitting on either side of him. The back seat was a single, continuous bench, and the seating arrangement in the bus was as follows. The driver and his assistant were at the front, followed by the married couple, then the young man sitting alone, then the elderly woman in the second to last seat. And finally, these three mysterious individuals who sat in the very last seat. This meant the elderly woman was the closest to them. She sat silently, cautiously, watching them out of the corner of her eye, tense and frozen with fear. The bus continued moving, and the driver's assistant noticed the fear on the passengers' faces. She signaled to them, speaking in a low voice, trying to calm them down by suggesting that perhaps these people had come from a theatrical performance or something similar. A few minutes passed as the bus kept moving, and then the married couple asked the driver to stop because they wanted to get off at the next station. The driver stopped, opened the door, and the couple got off. Now, the only passengers left were the young man, the elderly woman, the three mysterious individuals in the back, and, of course, the driver and his assistant. The bus resumed its journey, and strangely, the elderly woman, who was the closest to the three mysterious individuals, kept glancing around nervously every few moments as the bus moved. It was as if she believed it was impossible for them to be human. In fact, it wasn't just her. Everyone on the bus was uneasy because of the strange appearance of these individuals who had suddenly boarded. The passengers were convinced these weren't humans at all. They remained silent the entire time, not uttering a single word, except for the elderly woman, who was so close to them that she saw things that made her act in a very clever and unexpected way. Suddenly, the elderly woman grabbed the young man sitting in front of her and started shouting loudly, "Thief! Thief!" The young man was in complete shock, not understanding what was happening. She kept yelling at the top of her lungs, telling the driver that this young man had stolen her wallet and money. The young man tried to defend himself, saying, "How could I steal from you when I'm sitting in front of you?" But the elderly woman wouldn't listen, insisting that he had stolen from her. She demanded that they go to the police to file a report, telling the driver to either take them to the station or let them off to continue on their own. With her persistent shouting and high-pitched voice, the driver stopped the bus in the middle of the road, let the two of them off, and continued on his way. Now, here's the question for this episode, as usual. I want you to pause the video and write in the comments below your guess. Why did the elderly woman get off the bus and act this way? Share your guesses, and let's see who gets it right by the end. Now, let's continue and uncover the shocking truth together. After the elderly woman and the young man got off, she left him alone and continued walking as if nothing had happened. The young man was stunned and confused, calling out to her, saying, "Didn't you say I was a thief? What's going on? Why are you walking away like nothing happened? Let's go to the police station." At this point, the elderly woman stopped calmly, turned to the young man, and said, "Instead of thanking me for saving your life from certain death, you're questioning me? If you had stayed on that bus, your life would have ended immediately." The young man, shocked, asked her what she meant. She began explaining the details of what she had seen on the bus, while he listened in disbelief. She said the two individuals who boarded last weren't human. They were demons in disguise. If he had paid closer attention to their features, he would have realized they weren't human at all. Their faces were completely still, as if they had no life in them. And if he had looked closely, he would have noticed that the long clothing they wore completely covered their legs, not because it was just long, but because the only way to identify them was through their legs, which wouldn't look human at all. The young man, in shock, asked her how she knew this. She continued, saying she was certain of it when she noticed their legs as they sat behind her. The third person they were carrying was the only human among them, but they had already finished him off. The young man, hearing all this, thought the elderly woman must be delusional or crazy. He didn't take her words seriously, dismissed her, and went home. But the story didn't end there, and what happened next was completely unexpected. The next morning, the young man was shocked by news he never could have anticipated. The bus they had been on the previous night had disappeared without a trace and never returned to the station. The station filed a police report, and authorities did everything they could to locate the bus, but it was nowhere to be found. The police officially announced that bus number 375 was completely missing, and anyone who had information or had been on the bus that night was urged to come to the police station immediately. As soon as the elderly woman saw the announcement, she went straight to the police and recounted everything she had seen on the bus that night in detail, as she was a witness and a passenger. She said 3 individuals had boarded the bus on the road, and it was impossible for them to be human. They were either jinn or demons. But, as expected, the police didn't believe in things like jinn or demons and wouldn't open a case against supernatural entities. They assumed the elderly woman was just rambling. The young man, after hearing about the disappearance, also went to the police station and shared the full details. Just 2 days after the bus went missing, before the case was closed, the police received a call from a local resident living near a lake in that area. He reported seeing a large bus submerged in the lake. When the police arrived at the location, the real horror began. It was indeed bus number 375, the missing bus. I say real horror because what you're about to hear is beyond comprehension. The bus was found in an artificial lake about 100 kilometers away from where it was supposed to be. The second terrifying detail was that none of the street surveillance cameras showed the bus passing through that area or deviating from its main route. So how did it end up there? Even more shocking, the fuel in the bus's tank wasn't enough to travel that distance. The station confirmed that the bus had just enough fuel to complete its route. So how did it travel 100 kilometers? And the most terrifying part, when the police opened the fuel tank, they found it filled with blood, not gasoline. But the biggest shock of all was this. When they found bus number 375 in the artificial lake, they discovered 3 bodies inside, in horrifying condition. One was the driver, another was his assistant, and the third was an unidentified person, likely the one the 2 mysterious individuals had been carrying. The 3 bodies had died in a strange, terrifying, and unknown manner. Neither the police nor the coroner could determine the cause of death. The bodies had their mouths open, with expressions of extreme fear and terror on their faces, as if they had seen something that stopped their hearts. So, was what happened to them really the work of demons? Or was it something else that the human mind cannot comprehend? Back then, it remained a mystery. Write your opinions and theories in the comments, and I think that's where we'll end this story.